we already have in process the neighborhood councils, which is a good first step because they are part of the city government structure and a way in which people can become more engaged. We also have lots of outreach efforts with community organizations to get stakeholders involved. And we've done this when the CRA used to be in existence, the Community Redevelopment Agency, seeking input from local residents and businesses and community stakeholders. You want people to get engaged in the process. And if we actually listen to what the residents and the stakeholders in the area wanted, instead of asking for input and then ignoring the input and doing whatever the council member wants, I think it would mean that people would get engaged. And when you have more people engaged, you can have a better system because you've got so many eyes and watching what's happening. I believe that we can make things better for the small businesses. As far as my own personal involvement in economic development, it's a bigger picture because I worked on national issues for policy. But what I could say to you is that getting people to the table to sit and understand the situation is the first step before you can do anything else. Economic development doesn't happen just because we wish it to happen. But as a council member, you have great influence to bring in the private sector. We can figure out, remember how I talked about public-private partnerships? I want to foster an atmosphere in which that is the norm. When we say we want everyone's input to make this better. So just because you're 16 doesn't mean I ignore you, or because you're now 84, I ignore you. People have different strengths, and I do believe teenagers as well as senior citizens have much to add because they have different perspectives. It doesn't mean we're going to take only their one side, but we can't say pick and choose and go, well, you were educated, you weren't, you know this, no. We're a community that needs to work together. That's my philosophy, that everyone has something to add, and that's how we make economic development happen.
Dr. Smith, you begin? Some residents feel excluded or ignored regarding critical decisions about the planning and economic development of their community. As a council member, how do you plan to empower residents to play a larger and more consistent role in determining the planning and economic development of their community? And what is your experience in working with resident stakeholders on economic development issues?
I'm, in addition to being the things I mentioned, I opened the first urgent care center in Los Angeles back in 1981, the Baldwin Hills Medical Center. And as a result of that, I interfaced with, it was located just adjacent to Culver City, so it was on Rodeo Road, just east of La Cienega. If you crossed La Cienega, that was Culver City. To back up for a minute, as I mentioned, to keep close reins on what's happening in the community as far as the residents, one thing I would do is to implement a precinct captain system, whereby, as I said, as it turns out, the 10th district is already divided up into over 100 precincts. And so I would have precinct captains who were responsible to get back to me. But it has to be when it comes to business, as you said, and development and community input, that there has to be some give and take, if you will, by both. But certainly right now there's no responsible person in place. And I mean, you have these council meetings and that, but there's nobody really ultimately whose feet can be held to the fire. But that's different when you have a precinct captain, because not only would I hold his feet to the fire, but the community would hold his feet to the fire if he's not doing his job in protecting the residents from whether it be whatever is needed. How about the fact that the last council meeting I went to, there, the police officer had the most say, and what seemed like one of the biggest issues had to do with cars being parked and 7-Eleven staying open too late and all those kinds of problems. There are many problems that arise but I just want to have a minute and real quickly, on the business side of things, I'd like to say that there's an unlevel playing field that's pretty much self-imposed in that if you look at Los Angeles County as a nation, we'd be the 10th richest nation in the world if the county was a nation. The city and the county issue billions of dollars in contracts every year. I'd like to see much more of that coming back to our local residents as opposed to going the other side of the world because the cost of doing business, whatever that happens to be, is less expensive. We have a responsibility to our residents for jobs, especially our youth, and we could do that very easily. Like I said, we're the 10th, if this were a nation, that is LA County, we'd be the 10th largest nation in the country. There's no reason that our young people should not have jobs and our residents should not have jobs. So I would say that if you're a local resident, or have a local business, I should say, you should get extra points in that procurement contract.
Thank you, Dr. Smith.
Okay, but you get the point, I hope.
We'll remind everyone you've got your index cards. We've got a few more questions before we get to them. Please write down your questions and we'll collect them.
Yes, and that's why I prepared what you have the folder, because it looks more like an evidence folder when you open it up. If you turn to, I have mine here, but anyway, I purposely included my answers to the Women League of Voters, their questionnaire, which was way back in January. If you look at that, my answers haven't changed. If you look at that, Herb Wesson, he was sponsored by the Sierra Club. He had 2 endorsements. One was from the Sierra Club. Well, if you look at who is the Sierra Club, well, let's turn to the second page. Well, it's called the Sierra Club Angeles chapter, which is wastewater system. So in other words, Herb Wesson looks like he's the 4th toilet to tap candidate, if you just look at the documents. And once again, I made the mistake when I went into the interview with the LA Times. I have a sense of humor, so I introduced myself as the stop toilet to tap candidate, but not knowing that Herb Wesson was really the toilet to tap candidate, and and the LA Times, had pretty much supported him even before we walked in. I think before we pretty much wasted our time interviewing there, it was already a pre-drawn conclusion or predetermined conclusion that they would endorse him, before that happened. Just like this is true in politics in Los Angeles. You have if you hear about a Democratic Party, a Democratic club, a Democratic whatever, look for them to automatically rubber stamp the incumbent. It's just an automatism. If you go to the next page, it's a little something about this Joseph Jensen treatment plant. In that they mention, I don't have my glasses on, but in that if you look, I believe up at the top part of that, it says enables the plant to distribute points within the valley to Ventura County and south to West Los Angeles, Santa Monica, Palos Verdes. So we're all getting it. It's not just limited. So I'd like to say too that I recognize that we have more in common than you might have thought. No matter where you live in the 10th district, we all have similar problems. The problems affect all of us pretty much the same. We want clean water. We like to have Colorado water, that comes from the Colorado River, preferably. We'd like to have more jobs. We'd like to have good jobs right here that the 10-year-old shouldn't have to ask where would he ever work if he got a college education. Okay. And I think I'll end on that now.
Ms. Yu.
Oh, I have a lot to say about what the LA Times endorsement had to say about me. If you all open up the back of your neighborhood news, it has a map of District 10. I'm showing you this because LA Weekly called this map the big fat turkey. And if you look at it, it does look like a turkey, right? Agree? It looks like a turkey. And I think that's why they chose to use the word plucky to describe me. Plucky. I had to look that up. No one uses the word plucky. Bold, courageous, audacious. Those are nice words. They all mean plucky. They also said I'm genial. I'm glad they found me nice and amicable here. It was an interview. I needed to be nice. They need to like me. And then they said I'm smart. So, not bad. They say, if Weston is too much of a politician, you is not enough of one. I didn't realize to be a public servant, you needed to be a politician who just says yes and then does the no behind the closed doors, right? I think residents in CD10 want someone who's going to speak honestly to you, tell you the truth, and say yes when we can and no when we can't. Sure, I'd love to fix all the broken sidewalks. Will I be able to? No. And when I shared this with the residents in the district, and I said, okay, there are 3 just on this street here, but we can't fix them all. We should prioritize. And that's what I want to do. I want people to be able to be engaged and prioritize along with me. I think that's how you get people engaged. I think that's how you get a new city council member. The LA Times said that I'm not strong enough. And I'm like thinking, what do you have to do to show that you're strong enough? They're like, well, we'll wait and see. Perhaps in the future, Ms. Yu will be worth looking at again, because she'll be here. You know what? I will be here. And I'm hoping to be your council member in this 2015 election. Because you know what? With people power, it can be done. I'm not the insider, but I have a belief that people, when told the truth, and hear it from me directly, and know that I'm telling you the truth, that you want to vote for me. You're rooting for me, and you're doing even more. You're going and telling your neighbors and friends, hey, I heard Grace. I like her. This morning I had a woman say, I'm a Weston fan, but you know what? After 5 minutes, she goes, I like what I am hearing. I'm voting for you.
Thank you, Ms. Yu.
You know, I've seen how much influence a city council member has at the local police station. I know because right after the La Defense fiasco or truth that the LA Times and Channel 9, KCAL News reported, the captain of the local Olympic station just got removed. So I would say, how did that happen? And typically when officers are placed elsewhere, they're given notice beforehand. A superior does not come in and say, take your things now, pack up and leave. If you do, then you would think something was horrifically wrong and therefore they're going to be taken off. That they would have to have like a cool down period and they wouldn't be employed by the city. They would have to take that time away. But that's not what happened. Captain Nieto was pulled. So you're going to find more stories coming up. So what I'm saying to you is the local council member has enough of a pull that police officers, when they're not doing things, they know they better unless they want to be pulled from their position. Or sometimes when you do the right thing, you get pulled if you have someone in a position where when they are exerting influence that you don't like. I think that's what happens when you're a person of power. So the fact that police officers in certain areas have shot defenseless young men of color, and we're not outraged, I I think there's something wrong. I've been to plenty hearings down at Parker Center where family members were upset that their little girl was shot in a drive-by shooting. You know, I've been in the audience where we're letting, you know, the police commission and the chief know, you're not doing right by us. I'm usually like one of 2, maybe 3 Asians in a definitely non-white room. So most of the audience happens to be African American and Latino. But I'm there because I know that it affects all of us. And city council members have a lot of influence in what police do. And so we need to hold our police accountable.
Dr. Smith?
Yes. I think there's the structure, overall structure, the cultural, that's going to have to change for things to really change. When you leave the urban centers of this country and you go to other outlying communities, it turns out people are policed by their friends and neighbors, people who grew up in the community, who know them. And so I would propose pretty much something very similar in that I would suggest that they start looking at recruiting candidates, police cadets, from communities, or candidates to be cadets from communities, with the intent of, after they're trained, to having them return to those same communities. Right now, they import the police from just various places, you know, in the surrounding areas of some cases, even from, you know, other parts of the country, out of state. I think, once again, we should get back to community policing and letting, like I said, we should look to our friends and neighbors. If you look at that situation that happened not long ago, they were not St. Louis, but in Missouri, when the young man got killed there, what did they do? The first thing they did was to turn to a state trooper, because that state trooper, he happened to grow up in that community and he knew the people, as opposed to the police force itself that was there. That many of them, you know, I don't know where they came from, but like I said, I believe the police should be reflective pretty much of the communities that they serve. If that happens, I think you're going to have a lot fewer shootings of unarmed men and those kinds of things once that occurs. So I'm in favor of community policing, letting the police officers get back to, you know, being on foot at times, walking through the community, doing things that police used to do. But right now they're kind of isolated. That you see them driving by in a car, and you know they're afraid of you, and you're afraid of them. And so that would change, once again, with true community policing, whereby we are policed by our friends and neighbors that live in our community. The police are right now, a lot of them are scared to death themselves, and that's why that may be one explanation for why they're so quick on the trigger. But like I said, perhaps if they were returned to their own communities, wherever it was that they came from, assuming it was in Los Angeles, I think there would be a lot less of those kinds of problems. Given the fact that if we were a nation, we'd be the 10th wealthiest nation on earth, that is the Los Angeles County, and all of the county and the city issue billions of dollars in contracts because they need everything that you can imagine. They need. Even the rail cars, they have to be made somewhere. If we concentrate, as I was starting to say, my office, when I was in office, that was right across the street from Culver City, there was a different culture. Even though my office was directly across the street from Culver City, that is the other side of La Cienega, I couldn't do business with the bus company there because, well, you're not part of Culver City. And as it turns out, the Chamber of Commerce and everything else, their emphasis is on, hey, we want to do business with businesses in Culver City. So why aren't we more focused on, hey, we want to do business with businesses that are based here in Los Angeles? Once that culture changes, your city changes. If you listen to me, you said, once again, we're the 10th wealthiest nation, if we were a nation on earth. I'd say 12 years from now, we should be looking a lot like Dubai. Answer that question.
Ms. Yu, 12 or 13 and a half, depending on where the Charter 1 passes years from now, at the conclusion of your term, share us your vision of what CD10 looks like.
I envision a CD10 in which the residents are happy, the streets are cleaner, safer, our relationship with the police isn't one of such hostility, and actually in most parts it's not as hostile as we just made it sound. In fact, I know most of our police officers are good. I've been part of the Olympic Booster Association. I'm the founding secretary. I created the 501c3 for Olympic Booster Association. I believe that our cops are really some of the best. Unfortunately, there are always one or two bad apples that really make things stink. Hopefully, we're nowhere near another Rampart kind of scandal. So I know, and I just wanted you to understand that I don't see the police as being that huge of a problem. There are problems, but not significant. And I will go further into saying I envision happier residents and more businesses. Too many of the streets are really not taken care of. And I don't mean just the sidewalks and the potholes. Those will be fixed. What I'm talking about is the lack of businesses, too many empty storefronts. If we made businesses streamlined in the city of Los Angeles, and I think we'll find more businesses. And because we will have implemented a master plan during this time period, we will be already completed or well towards completion of the visions of the neighbors in those residences. I think that with 12 years, hopefully only 12 and not 13 and a half, years in office, the residents will know that city government works for the people, and we will no longer be number 2 as one of the most corrupt cities in the nation. You know, Chicago has a distinction of being number 1. We've heard it for centuries, where the dead vote and people vote over and over again. Unfortunately, LA has now earned the reputation of being the 2nd most corrupt city in the nation. I believe we ended up earning this as well. I think when you have someone like me who's coming from a public service kind of background, you're going to see a change. Accountability, transparency, that's the way I will work.